Good morning, everybody. Yeah, if you haven't heard, I fell on my face. I'll be all right. I look like Gorbachev. God rest his soul. Today we are moving forward with our series based partly on the genre of the literature that we are studying. What I'm attempting to do in this series is to let you see that each different type of literature that are in the scriptures demands a different kind of interpretation. And today we're going to talk about the book of Philemon. First slide there, please. There we go, perfect. We have a type of literature called the epistles. And they're a type of letter, but they're a specific kind of letter. They are a letter from an apostle to either a person or a congregation or an area. And I'll show you the difference between these three during the lesson today. The problem in the early church is this. Jesus said that the disciples were to go throughout the earth and preach the gospel everywhere they went, which is what they did. As soon as he was ascended back into heaven, the apostles went every which way, and they started churches in all kinds of areas that had no understanding of biblical morality or law or anything like that. Each area had its own god or goddess. Each group had its own language. Each group had its own way of doing things. And so these apostles are going to all these different places, and the responsibility of the church was to teach these people biblical morality and who God is and who Jesus is and who Jesus was. Now, they had a lot of things in common. First of all, they had the Roman roads. The Roman roads went everywhere because the Roman legion had gone through all the known part of the earth in those days and had conquered it, and they built roads, and so the old saying is all roads lead to Rome. So they had the government, which was an overriding federal government, which was Roman. So they had all that in common. They also had, all these areas had as their second language the Greek language, because 300 years before Jesus, Alexander the Great had gone through all the same area that later became the Roman Empire, and they instituted Greek as the universal language, just as English is today. Throughout the world, you can go anywhere and you can find educated people that will speak English, Russian being the second language. So the people had an idea of Roman government, which was the Romans were in charge, but they were allowed to do their own thing. As long as they would worship the Caesar, they could worship any kind of other god that they wanted. But they also had the Greek language, literature, and mythology. And so the educated people would read the Greek myths and the idea of first cause, everything has a cause, and why did this happen? Because. And back to, well, where did the world come from? Because God made it. So they each had individual cults and gods in the area. So this is the type of job that Jesus gave to people, to go out and to Christianize the whole world and to continue to do that until he comes back. So as they did that, they ran into a lot of issues because people didn't understand what they were doing, number one, and they came up against things that certain cultures think are all right, but they're really not all right. And the danger in all these different types of churches, the danger was that they would just add Jesus to their list of gods, and they would try to bring their religion and merge it with Christianity. And so the letters are written against a whole bunch of issues that maybe we don't know today. It's like, next slide please. It's like listening to a phone call. Now, the other day, Sean was talking to somebody. I won't say who it was. And I should say somebody was talking to Sean because she was saying, uh-huh, yeah, mm-hmm. 10 minutes of silence. I knew who she was talking to. Or I should say, I knew who was talking to her. The letters are like that. They are written because of issues, but we only have the correction. It's like years ago when I wrote the book, The Lurking Devil of Murder, the murder that occurred here in Canandaigua. There were 3 papers in Canandaigua, there are 3 papers in Geneva, the Rochester papers covered it, and for the most part, the reporters were sitting in on the trial, and the only thing that they wrote down was the testimony. But they did not write down, for the most part, what the question was. So you had to figure out from the answer what the question was. And the letters are like that. And so, you know, there's a lot of things that are explicit in these letters, but there are some things that are, you have to kind of read into it. And I'll show you what I mean here in a little bit. Next slide. Okay, here's a list of the Bible books. We talked about the Gospels. The Gospels are for people who combined and recorded the teachings of Jesus. Some of them are the same in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John is a gospel in and of itself, but they all have one thing in common in that they are explaining what Jesus taught. Then comes the book of Acts. The book of Acts is a history in one way. It's other things as well, and I'll cover this book in a future sermon. But the book of Acts tells what St. Peter and St. Paul and Luke did, where they went on 3 missionary journeys, and where they started churches throughout the Roman Empire. And then the letters begin in Romans. Now, all of these books, Romans, 1 Corinthians, of course, Romans was written to the church in Rome. 1st and 2nd Corinthians were written to the church in Corinth, which is a Greek church. Galatians is a region. It's not a city. Ephesians is to the church in Ephesus. Philippians to the church in Philippi, which is Greek. And Colossians is written to the church in Colossae, which is a church in what they called Asia in those days. Now, it's interesting, maybe only to you, Jim, but the Colossian church is in Asia, but it's not mentioned in the 7 churches of Asia. So there were more churches than 7, because we have a book to the Colossians, and then we have 2 books to the Thessalonians. And Thessalonica is a city in Greece. Then we have 3 letters of Paul, which are written to Timothy, 1st and 2nd, and Titus. And these particular letters are written to teach Timothy how to train pastors, and Titus how to train pastors, and how the church should operate governmentally. They are personal letters, but they are specific to how the church should run. Then we come to Philemon, which is our subject today. Philemon and 3rd John are both personal letters as well. Do you ever get any letter? Nobody ever writes me any letters. Yesterday, some lady came crawling in here. I don't know what this has to do with anything. I thought it was interesting since we're talking about letters today. She came in. She was supposed to be in the hunter safety class. By the way, thank you everybody who helped with the hunter safety class. She came in on crutches. And she was saying something, and I was coming in, and I said, I can't understand, I'm half deaf. Speak up. She said, I'm praying. Okay. And then she hands me a letter addressed to me with this address and with her home address. And I open it up, and it says, I am not a regular form letter like it was a business letter with the headings and everything. I was not able to come to the class today because I didn't feel well. Well, Why did she show up in the afternoon? Yeah, she could have sent me an email. It would have been just as good, but she sent me a letter. You know, in biblical times, there was no texting, and there was no email, and there was no telephone, and there was no post office. And so if you wanted to contact somebody, you had to send a letter with somebody. And what they would do, they were scrolls. You didn't lick an envelope in those days. You didn't put a stamp on it. You would have to pay somebody to take the letter from one place to another. And they were scrolls, and they would take a candle, and they would drip colored wax on the scroll, and then they push their signet ring into, which is where we get the word signature from. And it was unpunishable. I think it was punishable by death if anybody opened the seal of a letter. And that's why the book of Revelation has the 7 seals. And if you look at those 7 seals in the book of Revelation, they're pestilence and war and silence, and they're all things that keep people from understanding God, all 7 of them. But the letter comes and it's sealed, and this particular letter to Philemon would have come sealed. Now, let me just say this. Some lady said to me years ago, "It's Philemon." I said, "No, it's Philemon." She said, "That's my father's name, and it's Philemon." I said, "Well, Philemon's name is a biblical name, and it's Philemon." She got mad. Do you remember that lady, Sean? You remember that event? And then I had a problem. I said to her, "Well, I can't help it if your father mispronounced his name his whole life." And, that wasn't the wise thing to say. She was really ticked. And I don't know if she ever forgave me for that, but it's Philemon. So we're going to talk about Philemon today. Well, let me just go look at the letters of Paul that we just mentioned are the ones that he wrote, and then the others that follow that are in green there, those are called the general epistles. There's 2 from Peter, 3 from John, 1 from Jude, the brother of Jesus, and 1 from James, the brother of Jesus. And of course, Revelation, a book unto its own. So we're going to talk about these letters, but today we're going to talk specifically about a personal letter, and I'll show you how to interpret it, okay? Is that all right with you? Now, I've put on the map, the area that we call Turkey, in biblical times, that was called Asia. And we think of Asia as being China and that way, but the East, it's east of Europe, and so it was called Asia. And that's where Colossae is. Now, in the Roman Empire, somewhere, and it depends on which area of the Roman Empire, the citizens were 10 to 20%. They are the voters. They are the educated people. They are the connected people. The non-citizens were free, but they didn't have all the rights. And they were somewhere between 50 and 70%, depending on where they lived. Some areas had more free persons than others. And then lastly, in the Roman Empire, 20 to 30% of the people were slaves. How would you like to be in that group? There's no understanding of biblical morality at all. They don't know anything about Judaism. They don't know anything about Moses. They don't know anything about Jesus. They're worshiping whatever god their ancestors worshipped. In Ephesus, they were worshiping the goddess Diana. And if you look at all these letters, Paul and the others are actually speaking to the current situations in their area. And so here we have an idea of what's going on in the Middle East in the first century. Next slide. Now I want to look at, before we talk about Philemon, I want you to notice that, let me just say this so you understand it. The book of Colossians, or the letter to the Colossians, and the book of Philemon, or the letter to Philemon, came to the same church in the same day by the same hand. The 2 letters arrived together in the church because Philemon was a leading member in the church in Colossae. You ever heard of this guy before? You ever read the book? So it says in Colossians, As to all my affairs, this is Paul writing, Tychicus, our beloved brother and faithful servant and fellow bondservant in the Lord, will bring you information. For I've sent him to you for this very purpose, that you may know about our circumstances, which were, he was imprisoned for preaching, and that he may encourage your hearts. And with him, Onesimus, our faithful and beloved brother, who's one of your number, they will inform you about the whole situation here. So Paul is writing, and he's saying that I'm in a dire situation. I'm in jail. I mean, this is, proven from other scriptures. And I want you to know what's going on with me. And I'm sending this fellow, and I'm sending this guy, Onesimus, with him. Well, who is this guy? Does it matter? Next slide. This is the ruins of Colossae. It's gone. According to Wikipedia, next slide, an ancient city in Asia Minor, significant city from the 5th century BC and onwards. It dwindled in importance by the time of Paul and was notable for the existence of its local angel cult. So their religion was to worship angels and probably actually devils who they thought were angels. And so the gospel is coming into this city that is, their culture is like that. So it's not important to today's lesson, but you get an idea of what they're up against. Next slide. So let's look at Philemon. Philemon is a one-chapter book, one-chapter letter. Paul, we know it's from Paul. A prisoner. This tells us his current situation. He is incarcerated. And Timothy, he's with Paul. This is the guy to which the two letters to Timothy are written at a different time. And the book of Titus, a similar book to a different guy. And the letter is written to Philemon, a beloved brother and fellow worker. So we know that Philemon is in fact one of the leaders in the church. Maybe he's an elder, maybe he's a pastor, maybe he's a deacon. The church is actually in his house. And Paul feels that it'd be good to contact him because he has something to tell him. And he may not like it. And to Apphia, our sister, and Archippus, our fellow soldier. Maybe he was a Roman. I don't know. Maybe the soldier means a worker for Christ, an evangelist. It could mean that. It could mean a Roman soldier. And to the church in your house. So we see from, it doesn't say Philemon is the leader in the church that's at his house. It doesn't say that. It just you have to read into it a little bit to understand it. So the letter is to this fellow. Verse 10, next slide. I'm appealing to you for my child, Onesimus, whose father I have become during my imprisonment. Well, Paul was 100% Jew. Onesimus is 100% heathen from Colossae. He's not his literal father, but he is his father in the faith because wherever Paul was imprisoned, and there's argument whether he was in Rome or some other place, it doesn't really matter to our story, but wherever he was preaching to this guy Onesimus, and Onesimus became a Christian, and Paul is his spiritual father. And so he knows this guy. And Onesimus' name means profitable or useful. We were talking yesterday down at the table with when we hunt, Paul, everybody, we give everybody a name. We used to hunt with Bigfoot and Elmer Fudd, and we would give a name to everybody. And sometimes people might be given a sarcastic name. And I can't prove this, but I suspect that Onesimus' name is sarcasm. Because it's likely he was a useless, no good guy. You say, well, how do you know that? What evidence do you have that that's the case? Well, I'm glad you asked. Next slide. People can change. Paul says to Philemon, formerly he was useless to you. So here we see that Onesimus knows Philemon. Paul also knows Philemon. Paul is very useful to Philemon. Philemon is very useful to Paul. Now he's found this guy who's been a problem for Philemon, and he says, by the way, can you imagine, you're sitting, there's a knock on the door. Who is it? Post office. You open the door, and there's Onesimus with a letter from Paul. Try to imagine it. Why is there a problem? There's a problem because Onesimus is a runaway slave who's owned by Philemon. He's run away to Rome or to wherever Paul was imprisoned. Paul preaches the gospel to him, and after the gospel, he becomes a Christian, and then I can just imagine what the conversation was. And Paul says, well, you have to go back and turn yourself in. Would that be the advice that you would give this guy? Probably not. Maybe you would. I don't know. It was normal for people to own slaves back then. It was in their culture. Nobody thought a thing of it. You know, culture has some bad things in it that nobody thinks a thing of it. I mean, an example of that is the abortion issue. It's generally accepted, but it's totally and completely wrong. Slavery was generally accepted, but it was totally and completely wrong. So he sends back and he says, I'm begging you for this guy. He's useful. He may have been useless to you, but he's indeed now useful. I don't know about you. When somebody does something to me, I tend to remember it forever. Especially if somebody does something to the church. You know this blessed church hopping, you know. I'm leaving. Okay, see ya. And then, you know, we have people that go and they have a problem. They're able to come back, and we always want to keep the door open, but we're going to watch that person for a while and make sure that they've changed their stripe a little bit. This guy, Onesimus, not only did he run away, but he stole money. So how does Jewish morality and Bible, which is all they had was the Jewish Bible in those days, how does the teaching of Jesus and the teaching of Moses apply to a situation like this? And the letters are all filled with things like this. Some people said, well, you can't eat any meat that's been sacrificed to idols. You know, people would bring meat to the idol temple, and the priest of the idol temple would take it and they would sell it to the butcher, and the butcher would cut it up and sell it at Wegmans. And some people said, you can't eat that meat because somebody offered it to idols. And others were saying, yeah, there's no such thing as an idol. It's just a stupid false god, so go ahead and eat. And it was a big argument. And if you read the letters, they were arguing about whether it was right or wrong. And that's the way these letters are. They're trying to make sense in a Gentile heathen culture of how Christianity should be played out. And Paul is suggesting that there needs to be some forgiveness here. And it's going to be a tough, you know what the penalty for leaving if you're a slave is, right? It's not good. Crucifixion is the punishment. So Paul says, he formerly was useful. He formerly was useless, but now he's youthful. He's useful to me, and he's useful to you. Do you know anybody named Useless? Kelly once had a cat named Useless, I think, didn't she? Next slide. I'm sending him, that is, my own heart. He's standing before you, and I want you to know that he is my heart. I love him. I led him to the Lord. He's changed. I love him. I'm sending him back because you own him. And I want you to do the right thing. Did you know this was in the Bible? There's cool stuff in the Bible. I wanted to keep him with me. Why? Because he's useful. You know what a useful person is? A useful person is one that does the things that keep you from stressing out. Like the helpers that came the other day yesterday for hunter safety. Everybody did what they could do. It was awesome. It went very, very well. I wanted to keep him so that he might be of service to me in your place. So he's saying that you should be here helping me, but you're doing something else. You're working for God, but I wanted him, since you own him and he's serving me and we're reaching out to people and everything is, we're ministering for God, and he can be here in your place because I love him and he's my heart. You see how the biblical morality is coming across in what he's trying to say to Philemon. Next slide. I preferred to do nothing without your consent, in order that your good deed might be voluntary and not something forced. This sounds so much like manipulation to me. What do you think? Is it manipulation? Yeah, New American Standard says it this way. Without your consent, I did not want to do anything so that your goodness would not in effect be by compulsion or but of your own free will. I don't know about you, but sometimes things come up and we have to do them, and it looks like we have to do them by compulsion. But if you have to do it by compulsion, your heart isn't right in it. And if you have to do the thing that's right and you do it because of your own free will, then there's some sort of greater blessing and reward. So he's speaking. Can you imagine reading this letter and this escaped slave is standing in front of you? And Paul is saying, this is a good guy. We need to work with him. And then he says this, perhaps this is the reason he was separated from you for a while, so that you might have him back forever. Paul is the one who said, click one more time, we know all things work together for good, for those who love God and those who are called according to his purpose. What are the chances that a slave could escape from Colossae and go to Rome or wherever Paul was in prison and meet up with Paul, and God, the Holy Spirit is working in everybody's life there, and Paul feels led of God to preach to this guy and witness to him, and he immediately, even though he's a thief and even though he has escaped from his master, he's willing to go back and make it right. Well, you say, well, that's not really making it right to go back to be a slave, but he comes back with a little admonition from Paul that says, this guy is not to be a slave anymore. He's a brother. He's your brother. And perhaps he escaped so God could work it out so that you could be with him in eternity in the next life. And it's a pretty good argument, I think. Next slide, please. No longer as a slave. See that? People try to tell me that the Bible allows slavery. The Bible admits that there is slavery, but the Bible never, ever promotes slavery. If you look at the story of the Exodus, what's the story of the Exodus? 6 million people are enslaved in Egypt, and God sends hail and plagues and boils and gnats and frogs and turns the Nile into blood to get them freed. That's the seminal story in the whole Old Testament. Freedom from slavery. And the whole gospel in the New Testament is to change people from slavery to sin, to save them from the addictions of life and things that ruin life. And so Paul says to Philemon, perhaps God worked this out so that Onesimus would not be a slave anymore, but a beloved brother, especially to me, but how much more to you, both in the flesh and in the Lord. You see, the teaching of Paul from the beginning was this. Next slide, Galatians 3:28. There is neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free man. There is neither male nor female. You are all one in Jesus Christ. This is the true gospel. This is why women immediately accepted the gospel when it was preached, because they were second-class citizens. This is why slaves immediately accepted Christ, because they were put on an equal level with the owners. And if you read the book by Green, Evangelism in the New Testament, it was countercultural, to say the very least. Women equal? Yeah. Women equal. Slaves equal? Yeah. Poor people equal with rich people? Yes. That's the gospel. Paul always taught this. Next slide, please. So, if you consider me your partner, he was his father, he was his spiritual father. If you consider me your partner, welcome him as you would welcome me. Treat him exactly like you would treat me if I walked in the door. Give him a bed in the same room that you would give me if I was visiting. Feed him the same food you would feed me if I was visiting. And then here's the clincher. If he's wronged you in any way or owes you anything, charge that to my account. So here, it's not specifically stated that Onesimus has stolen money, but Paul is acknowledging that he owes him money. And he's saying, put it on my bill. It's like the Good Samaritan goes and puts the guy in the hotel, and he says, well, if there's anything more that he owes, next time I come by, I'll pay it. So we have a real problem. We have an escaped slave that could be crucified if caught, and we have an upset slave owner. It's going to be a problem in the church. You know what I mean? There's problems in the church. There are problems that occur because our thinking in our culture, things are different, and the light of the scriptures need to be shined on those areas, and there has to be some way to work these things out. And there's always issues between people, the way people think, the way different cultures think. Everybody is the same in the gospel, and Paul is saying, I will pay. Next slide. It says here, I, Paul, am writing with my own hand. Now, the one thing about the letters is that people didn't generally write the letters themselves. They would have a scribe write the letters. And there are some other examples of this in the letters of Paul, where the scribe writes the letter, and then Paul just signs it in the end. But what Paul is doing here is he's saying, here's my promissory note. I'm signing it with my own signature. I will repay you if he owes anything. So it's clear. The debt is cleared. It's switched from Onesimus to Paul. But Philemon owes Paul his eternal life. Paul has led Philemon to the Lord as well. Onesimus owes Paul his eternal life. And so the fact that Paul is probably the only person that could have reconciled this situation. I will repay it. Then here it goes again. I say nothing about you owing me even your own self. Yeah, I'm not going to mention that you owe me your own life. Verse 8, for this reason, though I am bold enough in Christ to command you to do your duty, I would rather appeal to you on the basis of love. And I, Paul, do this as an old man and now also as a prisoner of Christ. For the love of God, I'm an old guy. Don't make me to go down my grave in sorrow because you have enslaved your brother. What do you think about this? We have a mic waiting for you.
So I think it was obvious that Paul recognized that Philemon was still struggling with the whole idea of being a Christian, because he used those play on words. You know, do this because it's right and you're a Christian brother, but also do it because
you owe me, buddy.
You owe me, right? So I think Paul recognized that Philemon was struggling with Christian concepts of forgiveness and grace and everything. And to me, that relates to Christianity today, for those that believe that somehow they're more valuable to God and Christ because of what they do as Christians, versus the fact that we're saved by grace and not by anything we've done. We're saved because of all the wrong things we've done. And therefore, we can't elevate ourselves as Christians above any other Christian, because our sins are just as dark as their sins. But we do it anyway. I mean, as people, we do that all the time.
Anyone else? Did I mention the title of this? I don't think I did. I thought I had it in there. I called this sermon, The Man Who Stole Himself. Don't steal yourself. Give yourself to Jesus. Anybody else? All right. I got to go to Hammondsport for a family reunion. And I have to explain to them why I've got a big knot on my head.